Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Fraud Fighters Unplugged. I'm absolutely honored today to have Chris and Michael with me, two deep domain experts in the field as it relates to loyalty programs, affinity programs, the airline industry. They're going to introduce themselves here in a little bit, but really honored to have two guys that are deep in the weeds on what's happening so quickly in this industry. As a matter of housekeeping, as we always do, if you have any questions, DM either me or Chris or Michael on LinkedIn. They're happy to follow up. Or if you want to send the questions to me, I'm happy to vector it to them and they can follow up after that. So welcome everybody. With that, Chris, because you're first on my screen, go ahead and introduce yourself, then we'll pivot to Michael.
So good afternoon, Frank, and thanks for having us. I'm Chris. I'm one of the co-founders of the Loyalty Security Alliance, and we're a 6-year-old organization that helps loyalty programs to prevent fraud. And both Michael and I'll let him introduce himself, but we come more from the marketing side, so we're trying to bridge that gap between the cyber professionals and fraud professionals like yourself in marketing, because one of the problems in loyalty fraud is that gap.
Yeah.
So, and Michael, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I think, that is interesting in terms of the people that are involved. So it's not just program managers at hotels or airlines. It's also their chief information officers, their cyber people, and then also their fraud managers. And that's the bit where we really try and help everybody talk one another's language.
Yeah, but when we create these silos, I think the fraudsters know where they are. So that hopefully we're bridging that gap.
They know where to focus, Chris and Michael. It's very interesting. This is such a salient topic, and one that's very dynamic. I mean, the kind of pivot from the traditional fraud attack surfaces that we saw in airlines and across most of e-commerce, and typically credit card. There's enough, kind of regulatory stuff out there now. There's enough mitigants out there now that it's become a little more difficult to kind of get away with that. So what we're seeing is fraudsters really pivot to other forms of currency. And Chris and Malcolm, before I toss it to you, the reality is that, as we all know, affinity programs, whether they be through loyalty programs at the airline or your credit card miles or whatever, are just a form of digital currency. And as such, it exposes, I think, the whole industry to a couple of things. Number one, it starts to fall under the regulation for AML, because AML has been amended now to include really any form of currency that could be used, as a money laundering mechanism. And then secondly, I think what makes this such a unique threat is that for most of us, these points are unchaperoned dollars. We earn these miles, we put them up there, we forget about them. And in our own research, and Michael, I know you're deep on research, you can speak to this as well, but in our own research, we've seen bot attacks against airlines just in Q1 increase 94% over prior quarters. And by our count, somewhere around $4 billion last year was lost in either the scams or making people whole on the scams or the associated fines issued by these regulatory bodies and under the law for not having your act together from an AML perspective. So, Chris, you and I were talking as the call got started about one of the mitigants we've introduced is MFA. Maybe dive a little bit deep into that if you would. How was MFA being introduced? How quickly was it rushed out there? Maybe what are some vulnerabilities that you see that have yet to manifest themselves in the MFA mitigant?
Well, let me start with some scene setting, just to build on what you said. I think we are where we are because when airlines and hotels and other companies with loyalty programs did threat assessments years back, the threat assessment consulting firm said those are just the points. Yes. So the loyalty programs are less defended. That got us into this situation. Yep. Also, where with credit cards, credit card fraud is either steady or down in most regions of the world. Why? Because airlines and hotels have gotten particularly good at they're using their credit card fraud tools. That's optimized PSD2. So this is threat actors are looking for easier pickings, and so loyalty programs are one of those. ATOs are increasing, and in response, airlines and hotels and banks are putting in multi-factor or two-factor authentication. That's been a boom. It's been happening quite a bit in, let's say, the last 3 months. And so it seems like maybe a bit of a sheep, like Hotel A did it, so Hotel B copied, Airline A did it, so Airline B copied. So most of the industry has done this very quickly. And I'm sure there'll be adjustments because anything that happens that quickly probably leaves some opportunities for fraudsters and rooms for internal error. So, Michael,
Michael, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think the opportunity for the fraudsters, it's they look at these things and they learn quicker than the programs. So the program managers at the airlines and the hotels, they think, tick, we've done it. We're now protected. So they don't actually realize that to multi-factor authentication, they can all be spoofed. But you tell them how easy it is to get around it. And that AI is doing an even better job, something than I am. I can never get those traffic lights on the camera correct. So I think it's it's a really interesting bit that it has been put out very quickly. It has been put out on a lot of programs, platforms. Carte blanche, everybody gets it. Rather than actually is this that targeted. Is this a good customer that I know is a good customer because of the fraud tools that my cyber team are using that are actually protecting us upstream. So I think that's one of the bits where it isn't tick, it's done. It is not a silver bullet.
Yeah, that's right, Michael. It's interesting you said that. I can go today. In fact, I'm sure you guys have seen this, but we did a little bit of research in advance of this call. Went on the dark web through the various dark web channels and on the social channels available, and found sites that were selling. Literally, it had the logo of the airline next to it. It had the number of miles available and the cost to buy those miles. So basically, on the dark web, selling these packets where they're saying, "Hey, name your U.S. carrier. Doesn't matter. All of the U.S. carriers are on the site." And they go, "Hey, listen, for $12, I'll give you this many miles." So there really is a mechanism where, we normally look at it, we go, when somebody copies us as a form of flattery. In this case, it really is an Achilles heel because, Chris, to your point, the fishlets, the banks put out MFA solutions. The MFA compromise, fishlets were out within weeks. And basically, in a crime as a service world, these people are literally selling a service where they go, "I'll find the mitigant, I'll host it, I'll provide the way to, have the intrusion, typically through bots, and you just pay me a monthly fee, and I go from there." And I think it is a false sense of security. And right now they've relaxed a bit because they go, "Oh, wow, we've seen a decline in credit card fraud, and this is going to work." But just based on the research we did on the web, and I've got 6 airlines right now where literally here's the logo, here's the miles available. It very quickly pivots. Yeah, and Michael said it best. The early adopters of AI are the adversaries, the fraudsters, the bad guys. They're the ones who are adopting this stuff quickly and finding ways to use it. And if you're relying on traditional challenge techniques, it's just not going to work. You need a more comprehensive strategy. Maybe I'll start with Michael, then back to Chris. What are some of the things you're seeing in the industry outside of MFA where maybe the groups are less siloed or trying to break the silos, collaborating more to try to solve this problem?
Was that you want to go, Michael?
Oh, I think it's one of these bits where all of the tools that we're talking about now, for airline or hotel programs, it's not about actually making better locks. It's about making better doors. Because the fraudsters know they need to just keep pushing. It's easy enough to go to the dark web, even the surface web, and get someone to write you a bot that will create you 1 million accounts. These ghost accounts are then, getting taken over. What they're created to make it look as though they are real. And then they're being used by the people who are mileage brokering. The great example is Hotel Loyalty Program has a transfer mechanism with Airline program. So they do an account takeover in the hotel program. They then transfer those miles out to the Airline Loyalty Program, and to the Airline Loyalty Program, that all looks clean. It all looks as though it's genuine, and then the customer cashes out, or the fraudster cashes out from the airline program, and that's something that we know is exercising a lot of the airline and hotel programs.
Yeah, Michael, it's interesting where Chris jumps in, but the ghost account problem you just mentioned, this is the problem with unchaperoned money, right? We earn all these air miles, we forget they're there, and organizations try to get this stuff off their balance sheet. But part of the way they do that is to say, I'm going to create a program between budget, rent a car, between your hotel, between your airline, as a mechanism to bleed down that liability. And then in point of fact, Frank's not paying attention. Neither one of us, we're all traveling and busy. And as you said, Michael, next thing you know, the fraudster takes it, transfers it to your Bonvoy account, right? And then cashes out. And unfortunately, the consumer is not aware of this until much later. And that creates a huge problem for the airline because now they've got to replenish those points if they want to avoid the brand brain damage. Chris, any comments on that?
Well, I'm just to sort of sit on top of both of what you said. Credit card fraud is largely steady. So the fraudsters are looking for new attack vectors. You mentioned account takeovers. You're saying that you're seeing it up 90%. Successful attacks are probably up 30 to 40%.
That's right.
I feel the industry is sort of in a state of transition. If I'm comfortable fighting credit card fraud because I've been doing this for 15 years. Yeah. Now all of a sudden I have to, my staff, my systems, my mindset has to change. So I feel particularly in travel, we're sort of in that change period of shifting mentality away from credit card fraud to the new forms of fraud, which include the brokering, as Michael said, or broking is another word for it, ATOs, et cetera, cracking 2FA, and those are so three of the emerging frauds.
Yeah, as we wrap, fellas, because unbelievably we're already at time, but we could go on for hours on this. To our participants watching, reach out to Chris and Michael, deep domain experts. This is an emerging threat surface. It's going to get very, very complicated quickly. It has some regulation around it you should be aware of around AML. And the linkage of supply chain partners, as Michael indicated, between the brokering, as you said, between different organizations as a way to bleed down that balance sheet liability for points is a real deal. Fellas, it's been a great pleasure. Chris and Michael, really enjoyed having you here. For our people watching in, lots to talk about here. You've heard kind of a snippet and just a little bit of a taste of what's available out there. Christopher and Michael, I think will gladly reach out to you if you have any questions. So please DM them, as I said earlier, or DM me. We'll get them to them. Chris, Michael, real pleasure. Thank you so much for the great work you're doing, keeping travelers safe and consumers safe. And also thank you in advance for any help you'll provide our followers and people that are watching and tuning into the program.
Thanks, Frank, and thanks to the audience.
Appreciate it. Have a great day, fellas.
You too.